Okay, so there is a metaphysics, an implied metaphysics to Gödel's incompleteness theorem. Really obviously and profoundly so. An implied metaphysics. Gödel's incompleteness theorem, as I've started talking about, basically tells us that the logic of the formal system itself in mathematics is insufficient. It is incomplete. Incompleteness theorem. If you are just relying on the logic of the system itself as a proof in mathematics, and if you remember in one of the last videos, you might want to go back to it and re-listen to it. It's a really good video, if I do say so myself. Slam dunk, I must say. Really, really honestly nailed it. The Kant video. It's probably 1 or 2 videos back at this point. There's a picture of Hume's fork on the video. That'll give you some grounding for what I'm about to talk about here. I'm going to go forward as if you already know most of the stuff I've already said. Go over it a little, but not in depth. So you can't rely on the logic of the formal system itself to prove as a proof in mathematics. Why? It is incomplete. You could, if you were relying on the logic of the formal system, you could literally prove a lie. Literally prove a lie. I told you in that video that I just referenced about the liar's paradox. One version of the liar's paradox is this. This statement is false. You're lying, Craig. Am I? I'm lying, so the statement is true? The statement is true that the statement is false? Do you see what starts to happen? It's like a who's on first for the intelligentsia. If you think about it too much, it'll drive you mad. Now, as I explained in that last video, Bertrand Russell noticed that it could be applied to set theory. And I forget the exact formulation, something like this set contains everything but the thing not in the set, something like that. Doesn't really matter. The point is what I just said. It proves that you can't rely on the logic of the formal system itself. Why? Because if you are, you could literally prove a lie. Literally prove a lie. There is no such category as true by definition. Okay? So what does Gödel's incompleteness teach us metaphysically? That you have to rely on something transcendent to the formal system to ground the system. So there's a series of axioms and a series of assumptions that you need to carry into the investigation right from the start. Now, there's no such thing as a mathematical formalist these days. There kind of is, but it's a minority position on the verge of evaporation. Nobody really takes it seriously anymore. Why? Because Gödel's incompleteness theory successfully proved this, what I'm telling you. That you can't rely on the logic of the formal system itself, or you could literally prove a lie. So it has to be something, that's the metaphysics I'm talking about. It's very important. Key word again, transcendent. You have to rely on something what? Transcendent to the system itself to ground the system. A series of assumptions, a series of presuppositions, mathematical axioms that you have ahead of time. Now this is very, very, very close in spirit to the transcendental deduction that I pointed out is an argument we've borrowed from Kant that is being dramatically underused by the Christian community. Given the priors, what needs to be given what needs to be the case in order for the given to be true. X is a necessary precondition of Y, therefore X. It's a powerful tool of inference that is being dramatically underused by the Christian community. The reason why I really don't think we're going to have to work all that hard to prove the sky fairy, guys. I really don't. Why? Because this ground has already been covered by Godel and by Kant. The reason the most influential philosopher by far in the atheist community today is Hume. He's one of the most influential philosophers of all time. There are many people who think he's the greatest philosopher in the English language. The reason for his success has nothing to do with him. It's that he hitched his star. He happened to be in the right place in the right time talking about something that was heavily empiricism. Empiricism, more than anything else, is the practice responsible for the success of the physical sciences. But this ground has already been traversed by Kant. As I said, there's a lot of people, the reason why people don't automatically know this is because Kant is so notoriously hard to understand. There's a lot of people walking around with their pocket Hume. In the atheist communities in particular, it's the only philosopher Matt Dillhunt he ever cites. It's the only one I'm almost positive he's read most of. Outside of that, he's probably not read any of the other philosophers. But he's already been successfully dealt with by Kant. So really, we're not going to have to work that hard. We just have to unpack Kant properly and unpack Hume. The reason why most people don't know this is because Kant is so notoriously hard to understand. A lot of people walking around with their pocket, that's what I think, I could be wrong about that. A lot of people walking around with their pocket Hume, okay, where they plug in a Hume trope or an idea they borrowed from Hume, their Cliff's Notes version of Hume, and there's almost nobody doing it with Kant. Why? Because you have to kind of take a class in him, at least one, to understand the schema. It's really complicated, it's really technical. And even then you may struggle to understand it. Notoriously hard to understand. But what he's already done is given us the tools in the toolkit for a certain type of person that includes every atheist. There was a debate going all the way back 300 years between the rationalists, who were more like us, and the empiricists, who were more like the atheists. The empiricists won by a lot. Were winning by a lot. Why? Because of the association with empiricism and the physical sciences. The reason for the astonishing success of the physical sciences is really simple. First of all, almost everything can easily be reduced to just a set of physical properties. It's called reductive materialism. Reductive physicalism is astonishingly successful. Why? Because a philosophy needs to have three key ingredients. Is it logically consistent? Does it have explanatory power? And for some weird reason, I keep forgetting what the third was whenever I make the video. It's not important though. The one that's really important for this conversation is explanatory power. Materialism / physicalism has an extraordinary amount of explanatory power. Why? Because when you reduce things to just physical property, just simply its physical properties, there's a lot of information can be gleaned. So I have a steel desk in front of me. If I reduce it to just physical properties, there's a lot of stuff I can know. Now, there are a couple different types of deductions or tools of inference. One of the ways in which you can infer things automatically is just by empirical investigation, learning the facts of the matter. Remember, I said there were two prongs to Hume's fork: matters of fact and relation of ideas. Okay, matters of fact is what empirical investigation is all about. The sense data. What is it? What are the facts of the matter? When you understand just the facts of the matter, the reason why that was so astonishingly successful in terms of explanatory power is because it gives you a lot of information. And oftentimes the only tool of inference you need is to match a fact up with another fact. Why? Because usually something can automatically, logically follow and be deduced just from that. Just from that. So if you strip a steel desk to just its physical properties, the steel desk melts at 110 degrees. When I pour the melter into this, it solidifies. From that, you have the birth of the scientific revolution. The empirical facts are not in dispute. And the reason why it seems so extraordinarily powerful in terms of explanatory power is because there is a natural tool of inference called just a normal deduction. When you know the facts of the matter, oftentimes there are conclusions that logically and automatically follow. For example, with the most famous one, Socrates is a man, all men are mortal, therefore it organically, logically, and automatically follows that Socrates is mortal. So when you strip something down to just its physical properties and just ascertain the facts of the matter, there's an extraordinary amount of information and explanatory power offered to the practicing scientist. From that was born the scientific revolution. The problem is, two crises precipitated. The first crisis we've solved. The first crisis was we had to ground the second prong of Hume's fork, relation of ideas, in something more substantial than just the logic of the internal mathematical system. Why? Because if you're grounding it in just the logic of the internal mathematical system, you could literally prove a lie. Because it can be true according to the system itself, but actually false. Do you get that? That's really important, because there are metaphysical implications of Godel's incompleteness theorem. It's already happened, it's established fact, it's pretty much done away with formalism as a philosophy of math because of that. And what he literally proved is that the system itself is incomplete. It has to be grounded in something what? Transcendent to the system itself. Do you understand why that's a key idea? Because if you don't, this is going to be a lot easier than people think. all you got to do is basically unpack Godel and unpack Kant, and then you're 90% of the way to proving the sky fairy. For the most part, I think so, but we'll see. I think so. I honestly think so, but we'll see. Why is that? The typical atheist, the typical materialist, has a way of approaching reality. They say, do you have any empirical evidence for your sky fairy? Okay. The things that they automatically say are there is the same thing that the tools from the empiricist. If it has physical substance, if it's real, if it's tangible and I can run experiments on it, therefore that is something that we automatically overvalue in importance, and we devalue the transcendent type things. That's why we've done away with the logical, if you take Humean skepticism to its logical conclusion, it ends in logical positivism, where they're literally trying to do away with things that they because you start to devalue things like metaphysics, like, as airy fairy. These are woo things. These are things of no substance. These are things that cannot be proven. In that category, you put the sky fairy. The problem, or not the problem, but the one bridge where you get even the hard-headed, reasonable types to agree is math. Why? Because math cannot be empirically verified for either. Just like my sky fairy. Why? It has no spatial, temporal locality. And there are positions, philosophical, metaphysical, a priori assumptions about the world. There are ones that are automatically more consistent with atheism. For example, mathematical fictionalism, in philosophy of mind, physicalism/materialism. You don't need to adopt them as an atheist, but they usually go hand in hand. Why? Because it's a certain type of mindset that is overvaluing empirical information, overvaluing the information gleaned from the material world, and literally trying to do away with the things that are they consider more speculative in nature. It's a whole line of thought. It's a whole line of philosophy. And it ended in logical positivism, which was its logical and necessary outcome of that line of thinking. And it influenced the 20th century, precipitated a crisis in math. Why? Because if you are not grounding math in anything other than the formal logic of the system itself, you can't prove anything in math then, because you could literally prove a lie in accordance with the logic of the internal system. But it has also precipitated a crisis in physics that we are still at the tail end of working out. Heading into the 20th century, most of your scientists were heavily influenced by logical positivism and heavily influenced by scientism. And to this day, they're atheists, heavily influenced by scientism, a lot of them. Say things like philosophy's over. Just Dr. Matthew Hunt, who I brought up a couple times, when I said materialism is insufficient to explain the data. He literally said in the comments, materialism doesn't account for things, that would be science. That's a nonsensical statement. That's a nonsensical statement from someone who just doesn't have enough basic understanding of philosophy to understand what materialism is actually supposed to be. Now, the reason why metaphysical a priori assumptions are so important is because you can't see past them. In one of the other videos I made, I compared the fair maiden Rebecca, the apologist, the young earth creationist, to Sean Carroll. It's the same exact idea. Sean Carroll is a committed physicalist. Why? As I've said 1,000 times, because he thinks physicalism/materialism is synonymous with science. Why does he think that? Because they drilled that into their heads in the 20th century in the science courses. Because of the astonishing success of the physical scientists and materialism. They had mistaken the wood for the trees. So they drilled it into his head. Physicalism/materialism and science are synonymous. It's the exact same reason. So it's really hard for him to understand that the many worlds of interpretation of quantum mechanics is completely insane. Why? Because it reconciles to materialism/physicalism, which is his starting point. So he can't see that it doesn't make any sense. He can't see that it's crazy. Why? Because it reconciles easily to his starting point. It doesn't debunk his foregone conclusion. It's the same reason, same thing going on when Rebecca, the young earth creationist, intelligent person, and not crazy at all. She just thinks that Christianity and for young earth creationism are synonymous. Just the same way that Sean Carroll thinks physicalism and science are synonymous. So he thinks physicalism is true, and he thinks it's synonymous with science. So a scientist can't be anything other than a physicalist. He's wrong about that, but that's his metaphysical a priori assumption about the world. It's literally almost impossible for him to see past that. It's a big blinder. Same reason a young earth creationist like Rebecca, who's intelligent, but her starting point is young earth creationism is true, and it's synonymous with Christianity. If I let go of young earth creationism, then I gotta stop believing in God. Why does she think that? Because that's what they drilled into her head morning, noon, and night at her church. That's what they drill into their heads at the funding churches. It's not true. It's the same principle as why Sean Carroll believes something not true. Why they drilled it into his head in his physics class. The astonishing success of the physical sciences is predicated on materialism being true when materialism is utterly false. So heading into the 20th century, we had scientists who stopped doing philosophy, by the way, they branched off. It's same thing happened in actual colleges. If you major in physics, you don't have to take philosophy anymore. Right? You ever been to a college recently? That was even there when I was in college. 1,000 years ago. When you take courses now, you don't have to even take electives. Usually you can avoid things altogether. So someone can just take science classes, not take any philosophy classes at all. You have to take electives, but you could choose like gym, or one of mine was movies. You don't have to take a philosophy class. So they don't know philosophy at all. So they don't appreciate it, and they become budding young scientismists. They think metaphysics and philosophy, that's archaic stuff. That's an outmoded way of thinking. Meanwhile, the entire predicate for how they've approached sciences is rooted in philosophy. All philosophy needs to mean is an interpretive framework. So when you talk about interpretations of quantum mechanics, Hunt, if you are listening, think clearly before you comment. Interpretation is something, a tool from the philosopher's toolkit. It has nothing to do with science. Interpretations of quantum mechanics are now the toolkit from the philosopher being applied to science. There's no such thing as science that is done with philosophy. Why? Because you need interpretive frameworks and you need clear ones. And there's no such thing as science is done with metaphysics. Why? Because it's self-refuting. Now, what has this got to do with Kant? All of the things that the skeptic type person, the materialist type person, they tend to lead towards a worldview that says matter and motion is all there is. If it isn't grounded in the physical, there's a good chance it isn't there. If it can't be empirically verified for, there's a good chance it isn't there. That's why they say, do you have evidence for your sky fairy? Usually they mean empirical evidence. Why? Because if it can't be grounded in physical reality, then it isn't there. The sky fairy is really hard to find empirical evidence for. Why? Supernatural. Ergo, by definition, outside of the purview of empirical investigation. Potentially problematic. The other potentially problematic thing about being apologist, that the one that I latched onto, is the argument from religious experience. I know it can be powerfully transformational. How do I know that for a fact? Because it's what's made me a Christian. I went to church and had a powerful religious experience that I 100% believed. I don't know if I 100% believed it the first time I had that it was God, but it rocked my world. And I was like, there's something really powerful and real about this. I need to investigate. That's the only thing I said to myself the first time. And as I said, that's an experiential claim, that ain't a faith claim. So forget that whole faith thing. It's not. It's an experiential claim. It's a similar claim than if I say, here's my bottle of lavender oil, I smell it and it makes me feel tired. I'm telling you about my direct experience. I am not making a faith claim at all. The problem is that it's entirely subjective, and I can't give to you my inner subjective experience. The only way for you to evidence my claim about my religious experience is to try it out for yourself. Similar to if I said, here's a bottle of lavender oil, makes me feel really tired, guaranteed it'll do the same thing to you. You'd have to try that particular brand of lavender oil and try it out for yourself. And as I said, it have to be that particular brand. Why? Qualia is content specific. Qualia is content specific. It is specific to the actual religious experience. It's not any old religious experience. It's the one I practice. So you would have to do my particular type of sky fairy religious experience according to how I do it. I would have to oversee it. Why? Qualia is content specific. So I would have to define the parameters of the experience for you in order for you to see, yeah, Craig is right. What? This really honestly does feel like God. Now, that could easily happen. Like I said, I'm going to try to build a bridge to that on my YouTube channel as soon as I figure out how to do that. Barring that, though, we have another tool of inference, the Transcendental Deduction, which is another way, so too are the metaphysics of math, at getting at that invisible immaterial realm where all the happy theists are, where the sky fairy exists, and which the atheist says isn't there at all. Because we can literally prove it's there a little bit. See what I'm saying? How? Just successfully unpack Kant, successfully unpack Godel. They've already done all the work for us. That makes sense? Giving you the roadmap. Giving you the roadmap for a game-changingly powerful argument for the existence of God that I do not think can be debunked. Why am I giving you the roadmap ahead of time? Because I don't think there's anything you can do about it. I'm going to tell you the internal logic of the ideas, and you can decide for yourself. So far, almost nobody challenges anything I say. It's like, oh, why? Because by the time I make a video about it, I've already thought most of it through. Okay, so where we are so far in the process, there is a really profound metaphysical implications for Godel's incompleteness theorem. It solved a crisis in mathematics. Today, in the physical scientists, in physics, we are still in the brink. We are still in the midst of a crisis in physics. Started with the advent of the quantum era. Now, as I've said 1,000 times now, quantum mechanics ain't all that trippy. What it does is debunk materialism. So if you go into quantum mechanics with the foregone conclusion, physicalism/materialism is I am looking for something to endorse that metaphysic, that's why they think it's trippy. Why? Because it decimates that metaphysical a priori assumption. It doesn't endorse it. It annihilates it. Had they been better philosophers, they would have known their Kant, and Kant been clear, they would have known their Kant. A lot of you know just from my videos the noumena-phenomena distinction. That's an actual fact. It's not just some sort of airy-fairy idea. There's the thing in itself, and there's my visual re-representation of the thing in itself. It is different. There's discrepancy there. Okay, now think about the observer phenomena in quantum mechanics, and tell me if this doesn't sound parallel to you. If they just understood their Kant a little better, quantum mechanics wouldn't have tripped them out at all. Prior to measurement, the particle appears as what? A wave of probability. Why is that so weird? Because a probability hasn't occurred yet. So for all intents and purposes, it seems like you're saying it isn't there until measured, or it isn't there until observed. Now, think of the real material world, the thing in itself, and think about how you actually see it. The thing that you actually see, which isn't the thing in itself, it's the noumena, phenomena is what you actually see, is different. And that ain't there until you look. You get it now? Oh, wait, yeah, parallels really nicely with quantum mechanics, doesn't it? Yeah, it really does. Why? Because there's a couch right in front of me. But the thing that I actually see isn't quite the couch. They know this for a fact. I've talked about this in my videos a lot. Both Donald Hoffman and Anil Seth both prove this in their lectures. Your visual cortex makes a re-representation of reality. So the thing you're actually seeing isn't there until you look. Isn't that interesting? Just like quantum mechanics. Oh, wow, yeah, total wow. Why didn't they know that immediately? Because they weren't studying philosophy. Back then, the physicists, some of the good physicists were really well grounded in philosophy. Einstein was, Schrodinger was. But other than that, it correlates really nicely with the phenomenon-nomenon distinction. The mathematics is really precise at the quantum level. So a subtle variation, wherein the actual doesn't appear until measured, is pretty much a mathematical representation of the phenomenon-nomenon distinction. As far as I can see, it is. As far as I know, I'm the only person who's saying that. So take it with a grain of salt if you want to. But to me, those parallel completely. I don't know why I'm the only person who's ever said that, but to me, that makes complete sense. So, take it with a grain of salt if you so choose, but to me, that's the same thing. The real point is, that's not really the point. The point is, materialism has been entirely done away with by quantum mechanics. It is inconsistent with the findings of quantum mechanics altogether. And everybody who tries to tell you otherwise either doesn't understand what materialism is or doesn't understand what quantum mechanics is actually telling us about the nature of reality. Why? It's a done deal. It's a done deal. It annihilates it. And that's usually one of the building blocks, the metaphysical a priori assumptions about the world that entail atheism. Okay? Now, one of the things that I've said time and time again, so much so that people are actually making fun of me for it, metaphysical a priori assumptions are the entirety of the ballgame. As I've said, why is it so challenging to get Pine Creek to see the argument from the resurrection? Because he lives in a different galaxy than you. A different galaxy. In his entire galaxy, the supernatural does not occur at all. In your galaxy, it does. The material facts are not in dispute. Some of them are. But the material facts are not enough to flip the metaphysical a priori assumption. They aren't even close. One time I was watching a debate between, I think that this will be the last thing I say and then I'll wrap it up. I'm just trying to lay the groundwork. I'm not, if you're an atheist and you're getting worried, keep your ties sheathed for the time being, but get ready to give them. get ready. Why? Because I can smell them. I really don't think this is going to be all that hard or challenging. I really don't. I think all it's going to require is unpacking Godel properly and unpacking Kant properly, and then maybe a couple other things. I doubt there's going to be that much more to it. So this ground has already been traversed. And metaphysics and philosophy are coming back into vogue. Why? Because we absolutely need them. That's what's precipitating the crisis in quantum mechanics. But anyways, okay, back to Pine Creek Doug. Sorry, change the subject. Thinking about your ties again, I get, start to feel funny inside when I start thinking about your ties. Why? Because I want them so badly. Especially the atheist ties. Those are the best type of ties that you can get. Atheist ties. That's like triple ties. Triple ties. Those are beautiful ties. All ties are beautiful. Why? Because they go towards my cool jet. So they're all beautiful in their own way. But atheist ties are just 3 times better. They're just so double delicious. Love them. Love them. Haven't gotten any yet, but I think the day's coming. So, Pine Creek Doug inhabits a different galaxy than you. In his galaxy, the supernatural does not occur. There's no amount of material facts that you're going to compile to get him to go, oh, the supernatural does occur. It just doesn't work like that. You have to get him to temporarily inhabit your galaxy to look at the facts from your perspective, from your paradigm of reality, and temporarily lay aside his paradigm of reality. So, for example, if you are talking about, and the other thing I've mentioned, I think I've mentioned enough times that I don't have to re-mention this, but with him is more resolute than with most atheists. A lot of atheists are not that heavily tethered to the idea that the supernatural does not occur. There's already some things that they think are supernatural that they see in their own life that they acknowledge are real. But the point is, there's a whole realm, the invisible, immaterial, transcendent realm, that is by definition the supernatural realm. It includes math. It includes the transcendent categories. And it's not the only transcendent category. There's the unity of personhood too, which I haven't even started to unpack. I mentioned it once in one video. You go back in time. You have a picture of Shannon from 10 years ago when she first started her job. All you're seeing is an image, a representation of Shannon. But you can easily connect the dots between that image and Shannon today and understand the unity of personhood without even trying to. That is in essence is as if you went back in time and entered the transcendent realm. What is going on in the transcendent realm is that is where your sense-making apparatus are located. That is where the preconditions of intelligibility are located. The presuppers are right about that. They're wrong about a couple of things because they push their argument too far. You don't have to, their form of the argument says that there are laws of logic and laws of math, so you get the atheist to acknowledge that there's laws of logic, which most atheists readily do, and the atheists will go, yes, the laws of logic exist, they're, invisible, immaterial, transcendent. Then they say, in order for you to ground that, there's got to be a God. Okay, you've already moved the argument too far. In order for you to see that you, the atheist, if you acknowledge the laws of logic and the mathematical axioms, you are already agreeing to something that in principle is already in the transcendent realm. Immaterial, invisible, transcendent, inviolate. Why are you doing that? Because it is the precondition of intelligibility. Why do we do metaphysics? Also the precondition of intelligibility. They tried to strip away metaphysics. Why? That's speculative. We're scientists, we don't do that. And technically it's easier. This may get a little complicated, but when you reduce everything to just physical properties, it's a lot easier if you take away metaphysical assignations. So I explained this in one video. You've got a pen, that's a metaphysical assignation, an object, and a table. That's an object. Both of those are those aren't necessarily pen and table. According to the material facts, set of properties X, set of properties Y. It's a lot easier for a scientist to think of it without metaphysics at all. Why? Because he's just trying to build a model to predict an outcome. Make predictions about the interaction of those physical properties. It's always doing. That's why physical reductive materialism is so astonishingly successful. Why? Because it's so good at doing that. You reduce almost everything to physical properties. There's tons of information you will learn about both the pen and the table and how they interact. And from that, you will get a lot of information which you can logically deduce things. So the power, the explanatory power it offered the scientist deceived them into thinking the underlying metaphysics are correct when they're not. Do you get it? Physicalism/materialism is not correct. Kant knew that. If they had studied Kant, they would have understood that. Why? Because he's the first person who introduced the transcendental deductions. Things that are immaterial in essence, that we use to categorize and metaphysically assign value and properties and reality to things that don't have any material substance whatsoever. You can't do away with that whole realm. Why? Because it's where the sense-making apparati are located. So we headed into the 20th century with a whole bunch of scientists who thought matter and motion was all there is. Matter and motion was also the metaphysical a priori assumption underneath all there is. And then they started looking at the facts. And the facts got weird. And that's what has precipitated the crisis in physics to this day. As I said, I think the crisis is going to be over with Carlo Rovelli's relational school of quantum mechanics. Because I think it solves. I think it really easily solves. It's very parsimonious interpretation of quantum mechanics. The reason why I think personally it's been slow to catch on is because it annihilates materialism as a candidate option. You have to lay aside that metaphysical a priori assumption about the world. Why? Because it destroys it. That's why it's been slow to catch on. Scientists would rather believe something utterly absurd like the many worlds interpretation than something completely sensible. And it's completely sensible. As I think I explained in the other video, just ask, here's a question. Where's Germany? Question doesn't make any sense without a reference point, correct? Where's Germany relative to what? If you're making a map, Germany is not anywhere. Germany is here relative to France there and Italy there. There's no such thing as a location without a reference point. Just as there's no such thing as velocity without a reference point. How fast is the train going? Relative to what? Okay, there's also no such thing as a particle, which we didn't know prior to quantum mechanics, without a reference point. Where's the particle? We don't know yet. Why? Because we haven't started the observation. You get it now? Where's the particle? We don't know. The question is incoherent until measured. Why? Because it needs the reference point. All properties are relative properties. That's the essence of relational quantum mechanics. There's no such thing as a property independent of its interactions. No such thing. Just as there's no such thing as a measurement independent of its reference. I mean, of a location. Where's Germany independent of relative to what? The question has to be finished. How fast is the train going? Relative to what? Where is the particle? Same idea, relative to what? There's no such thing as a particle independent of its interaction. That's the only thing quantum mechanics is telling us. But that annihilates materialism as a candidate option. Why? Because materialism presupposes that there's a set of objective facts over there that don't change. When they interact with the scientist or the observer, whatever you want to call it, the measuring device, they do change. They do. There's a form of entanglement between the subject and the object that can never be disentangled. That's what quantum mechanics teaches us conclusively. So materialism is over. And once materialism ends and relational quantum mechanics, which I think will be the mainstream position, is accepted, it's going to make it a lot of atheism is going to disappear with that. that's one of the reasons, but there's a whole bunch of reasons. But yeah, I guess I'm rambling a little. I don't know. I thought it was cool. I thought it was a good video, actually. I really did. I thought it was pretty sharp. All right, I'll wrap it up early. 34 minutes. Not technically early by the other standards, but I can usually yammer away for 50 or so. So I'll wrap it up early. I'll listen to this video again. I'm pretty sure everything I said was clear. If it's not quite clear to you yet, don't worry. Why? Because I'll be fashioning this out into a coherent whole series of points that are all interrelated. They're all really powerfully interrelated. It's going to be, ultimately it's going to be a really powerful, I think, argument for the Sky Fairy. Ultimately, yeah, I really do. So we'll see. Pretty ambitious claim, I know, but I'm a big, bold man. Big, bold men make big, tough claims. That's a big, tough claim, Craig. I understand that. Big, tough man. What do you want from me? Kick ass. It's part of what I do. It's part of what I make my videos. What? Kick ass. I came here to do things. Chew gum and kick ass. And I'm running out of gum. That's from, what's that from? They Live? I think originally that's from They Live. You might have heard that in different contexts, and people say it a lot. It's become like a cultural thing, like a Chuck Norris joke. But I think it originally started from They Live, a vastly underrated, really weird sci-fi movie. Rowdy Roddy Piper stars in it. It's really bizarre. You put on these sunglasses, and if you put the sunglasses on, you see that we're being invaded by aliens. But if you don't wear the sunglasses, you don't know. I swear to God, that's the premise. And it leads to a whole bunch of fun, entertaining things. So, anyways, I'll wrap it up early. This video might not have been as clear about the subject because there's some of this stuff I'm only introducing new into the Craig Reed bloodstream. But 5-10 videos from now, this is going to be really clear, and you'll understand clearly why I'm bringing all this stuff up. And it's all going to tie together with everything I've been talking about for going back to a year. So there you have it, kids. That's all for now. The Mass is ended. Go in peace. Amen.